Hello ladies and gentlemen, hopefully a very useful video this one. I've covered a lot of doping methods, more than the three shown here, but these are the three most popular. We've got epoxy, we've got superglue, and we've got doping wax. So in this video, I just want to compare and contrast all three of them. You can use this then to decide which one you want to use. They've all got their pros and cons. I wouldn't say that one is clearly better than the other two in every case. There are use cases for all three of these options. So in this video, I'll show all three side by side. You'll be able to get an understanding of how quickly some are, how slow some are, how easy some are, how hard some are, and you'll be able to decide for yourself whether you want to go ahead and just stick to one or the other, or like me, you might be able to mix and match. So in essence, I've just picked out three boulder opals. They're all very similar. We'll just have a look at this one. This is kind of the stuff that I work off the channel a lot of the times. Really simple little kind of boulder opal pieces like this. They make really good pendants with a hole kind of drilled through the sides. It's a good thickness, and even though these are all dry, so you won't be able to see how good they actually look. Like this one here is actually really nice, but dry you won't see much. What we're going to focus on is gluing. And the backs are fairly similar in terms of porosity. This one's a little bit loose and sandy, but they should all be pretty comparable, so we can actually have a really good look at all three of these methods and contrast them. So let's get it started. I'll just run through each one together and you'll be able to see them side by side, and we'll comment on it at the end. Alright, that was nice and easy. Now I will get into some of the finer aspects of the doping methods, each of them, but I have videos covering all of that like I mentioned earlier, so definitely check those out if you want a really detailed view on all three, all in separate videos. But for now, we'll just focus on basically just ranking them in terms of different aspects, where they shine, where they don't, and you guys can decide from there where you want to go, whether you want to try a new method or whether you want to stick to what you use already, or you just want to decide on making a mix like I do. So we'll just start off ease. The video showed it off clearly. Ease of use surely superglue is by far much simpler, much faster than the other two methods. The dopping wax has a bit of complexity, but in terms of speed, it's actually probably just below the superglue. And then the epoxy is definitely down here. This is a day later that I'm recording this part, and it's still fairly spongy, not fully cured. It is going to hold much stronger than the other two, but it is definitely one that takes a long time. So you typically dop a whole heap and you just set them aside and get back to them later on while you're working on other stones. So very easy to mix the glues, but it does take a long time. So that's also something to consider. Whereas superglue, just put a dob on the stick and then just press it up against the stone, hold it there for a couple seconds. It's firm enough to hold on its own, put it aside. It'll fully harden in a matter of like less than a minute and you're good to go. Dopping wax just takes a little bit of skill and preparation just to get the wax sorted. I tried to show off burning it and everything for some reason, even though I wasn't really recording in depth. So not sure why I did that. In essence, takes a lot more skill than the other two, but it is an instant hold. It's good to go. As soon as you cool it, just blow on it for a couple seconds and this is going to hold well and truly firm. Now in terms of reusability, this one's an interesting one because the superglue, it's not reusable. Like the superglue that I use is not reusable, but the tube of course is. However, so having said that, I didn't actually use this superglue in this video, and that's because it has died. It's sealed up in here, and that will happen over time because, I mean, this is a cheap superglue and these lids are never that good at sealing. I just keep it because it's got super written on it, and I always find that funny for some reason. So I actually used a thicker superglue, a Loctite. I do think thicker is better. But having said that, this thicker one does take a little bit longer to harden and cling on. The wax, you can literally reuse the wax that's just on this stick here. When I finish this stone, snap this off, pop it off, I can actually just re-melt this wax and it is good to go again. So you can see here, there's not a lot of wax that goes on there. But when this snaps off, you'll get this little flat spot of wax. Heat that back up, get your old metal plate on it again and just do the same thing, roll it around, the wax will go back to the top. You can literally reuse this stick and that wax. So this stick can actually last quite a long time. So in terms of reusability, the wax does win. Eventually this wax will deteriorate, especially if you burn it too much. You'll lose that stickiness. It'll melt, it just won't cling as well as you want. And then the araldite is a little bit better than the superglue. These tubes don't harden or anything because they're two-part. Keep them separate. Don't accidentally mix them together and have them touching each other with a bit of remnant between, or it will weld together. But of course, yeah, you can't reuse the epoxy that's been used for the stone. Now in terms of cost, cheapest would have to be the superglue. These things, I mean, you get them from a dollar shop for a pack of 10 or whatever. It's very cheap, doesn't cost anything, really easy to get. I can get this at the supermarket down the street. Araldite is similar, it's pretty cheap, a little bit more expensive than the superglue. But at the same time, I can get this from the supermarket, I think. Otherwise, just the hardware store just down a couple blocks over. So, also good. This stuff, I do actually have to order online. It can take a long time to get here, and it's also fairly expensive. It's gone up in price a lot lately. And yeah, it's actually not something that I restock often. And I only really use it in cases when I need a little bit of a stronger hold than superglue, but I also want an instant dop. Like if I'm working on a video and I really need a stone dopped and working on, then that's when I'll switch over to the dopping wax and get it done. Otherwise, I pretty much primarily always use araldite, the 5-minute version. And that is because of this final ranking factor, which I think is pretty important. It's probably the most important in my mind, and that's strength. So strength, I do put that epoxy as number one, clearly number one. It's a lot stronger in a lot of ways, especially when you're using or cutting with something like cold water. Sometimes the wax will not handle the cold water that well. So in winter, I only use the 5-minute epoxy really, unless I'm cutting with warm water. And then the wax is actually pretty good. It's a firm bond. If you can get it right, and if you can master the skill that is required to get a really firm hold, then this is actually really strong. If you see online that stones keep popping off for people, it's just because they haven't quite nailed the use of the wax yet. And then the superglue is great, it's quick, but the the bond strength of this is actually not that strong. It might be strong while it's dry, but when you're cutting and you're cutting with water, that's actually how I release the stone from these. So the water does eventually make it give up. It happens a little bit less if you're using a metal dop stick like a screw or a nail, but in the case of bamboo skewers kind of thing, or this is a chopstick, in the case of that, it does let go of the stone a little bit sooner than you would like sometimes. So you've got to be careful about that. So unfortunately, Superglue is ranked in 3rd. But yeah, depending on what you guys prioritize, it really is up to you which one you like, which one you can get a hold of easily. Maybe 5-minute epoxy, you don't live near a hardware store and you can't get it. In which case, yeah, maybe you might as well order online and just keep sticking with wax. But yeah, there's a lot of considerations that go into it. You guys make up your mind. Hopefully I've demonstrated it well in this video. And now I'll just go over a quick little deeper look into each of them, just in case you don't have time to go find one of the more detailed videos that I've already done. So we'll start off with the Superglue, because this is the simplest. So the Superglue, all you need to do, one droplet on the end of your dop stick, and then just boom, press it onto your stone, hold it there for a couple seconds, have a look at it, make sure it's all settled, and then just set that aside. That's good to go in a matter of seconds, or minutes if you really want to be safe and make sure it's cured. The epoxy, all it takes, little paddle pop stick, mixing stick, bit of a plastic mixer as well, 50-50 mix. Sometimes you'll use a different type of epoxy, in which case it might not be a 50-50. Keep an eye on that. If one tube is smaller than the other, it's most likely a 2/3 to 1/3 kind of thing, so make sure you get that right, or the hold will be a bit weird, or it might get brittle. Just mix it up, chuck it on the stone and the stick, let it kind of dry a little bit, and then chuck it together and it'll firm bond really quickly, but it won't be ready for actual use yet. I do recommend that you leave it at least overnight, if not at least 24 hours, and yeah, it says 5 minutes. It's not at full strength at 5 minutes. It's just going to hold relatively okay at 5 minutes. But when you're pressing this up against, well, even your Dremel, but if you've got wheels or a flat lap, it is going to pop off if you use it straight after 5 minutes, so be careful about that. Dopping wax, this one I recommend that you go watch a longer video on. I've done a real detailed one with all the tips and tricks that I've found over the years for dopping wax, because this one is the one that requires a little bit, I wouldn't say skill, just a little bit of practice. It's pretty low skill. All you need to do is get the wax onto the stick, of course using your little flame, and then you position the wax like I showed with this, just by rolling the stick up against it. It all just pushes up to the end. You end up with like a little pencil tip out the end, and then heat up your stone, which is the other tricky part. You just need to get the stone hot enough so that when you dab it with the wax, the wax starts to cling onto the stone, and that's when you know you've got the right temperature. And then just chuck it up against it, hold for a little bit, maybe dip your fingers in a little bit of water, and then just wipe so you don't have anything hanging over the edge. You don't want anything hanging over the edge because you want to work these edges down and get a nice dome and stuff. So like you can see here, I've just run my finger down it and just made sure that it's nicely held on. But yeah, that's the crash course in each of these. Pick your poison, whatever works for you or whatever's easiest for you to get. It really doesn't matter that much in the end. Just choose what you're comfortable with, what you get the best results with, and go with it from there. You'll get a lot of people online that say you have to use dopping wax. It's the only way to go. And honestly, it really isn't the case. You can easily go to the 5-minute epoxy. This will hold much stronger. Maybe much easier for you to get. You don't have to order it online. It is my favorite. I will be honest, it is my favorite. But in a lot of cases, the wax is the best. It does edge out the epoxy in terms of workable time and everything. So there's always things to toss up. And if you're really in a pinch, then yeah, hunt your nearest Superglue. It does work. It's got a lot of drawbacks. It is probably my least preferred of the three. But I've also covered other dopping methods that you can check out on the channel. Some I really don't recommend. Most of them I don't recommend. If these three don't have you covered, then you're in a bit of trouble. That's it. A quick little video summarizing all three, because I've done them all independently, but I've never done them all together. And so now we've got one where they're all together and people don't need to go hunting for the other videos unless they really want more details on each of them. So hopefully that's going to help a whole heap of people, and I will catch you around in another video. See you guys.